We made USAA insurance for veterans like James. When he found out how much USAA was helping members save, he said,
"It's time to switch."
We'll help you find the right coverage at the right price. USAA. What you're made of, we're made for. Restrictions apply.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Jacob Albrock, Paul Savage here with you on this Reaction Friday to the first round of the NFL Draft. We'll spend most of our time there today just because it's a lot to take in. I love it. 869-1240, the IHOP hotline is open for you. Some comments on our video stream here, which you can find on the KFH Facebook page, KFH YouTube page, and Sports Daily Twitter page. Jason said he loved the pick of Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Says the Chiefs have great defensive line coaching, and he could be molded into a solid NFL player. Look, I think solid NFL player is probably a pretty good way to look at it. I don't think, Paul, that the Chiefs wanted to pick at 31, quite frankly. Whether they were trying to move up and couldn't get it done, which you've heard some reports on, whether they were trying to trade out so that somebody could come up and get Will Levis, they also weren't successful in. So then it became, well, what do we do here? We've got to pick. And I think it was as simple as, we have been around this player a ton. We really like him. Let's just go with it. Let's just make it happen. And that's what they did. And I don't have a problem with it because I thought if they were going to pick there, and all the players that you had seen rumored to them that made sense to them there were gone now, then that's a spot where if you can't trade out of it, you take a swing, right? Like you swing for it. And I think that that's probably what they did. I don't think it was much of an overdraft. I think Felix Anudike-Uzomah was going in the second round anyway. Maybe third, but I don't think so. So did they draft him 15 spots ahead of where he might have gone according to all the mock drafts? Maybe. But if they really like the player and they know the player, which they do very well because he's in their backyard, then I thought it was fine. Now, is it top choice for me in the first round? No, it's not. I was hoping they'd be able to get him a little later, but they got him anyway. But the draft was falling, Paul, as we watched it. And I'm just like, man, this is going well for the Chiefs, right? Some offensive linemen went, right? And you were like, okay, well, that was a need, but not their biggest need. And then you got like a Jamar Gibbs pick, and you're like, okay, well, that makes somebody fall, right? But you were down to pick 16 without Christian Gonzalez going, the corner out of Oregon. I thought, okay, well, there's a spot. This guy's still on the board. It'd be great to see them trade up, right, and go after a guy like that. And then you get even further, they don't, down to 20, and none of the receivers have gone yet. And whether you were team Quentin Johnston, whether you were team Zay Flowers, which we know the Chiefs were really high on him, Jackson Smith in Jigba, who is highly rated by most, or even Jordan Addison, those were sort of the four guys. It's like, God, the Chiefs could go get their receiver right now, and it's only going to cost them what it would take to move up 10 spots to go do it. If you were in the camp of getting a receiver, it was all lining up for them. And they didn't do it, and all of a sudden, those four receivers go with 4 consecutive picks. You had the run on wide receivers. It's like, okay, well, now we're to pick 24. Mazie Smith out of Michigan, I think, is a guy that a lot of people liked. I don't know that I liked him as much for the Chiefs. He's a big guy, and they have Chris Jones in the middle, and I've never liked the experiment of putting Chris Jones on the edge full time. But you had Anton Harrison, who is maybe the most rumored player to Kansas City, still sitting there. And Nolan Smith is still sitting there, Paul, and that's probably the big one. I don't know that anybody saw that coming. And it's like, okay, they just can move up a couple of spots and get one of these linemen that we really like, right? Most people really like, and they didn't do it. And maybe they tried and they couldn't get it done. And I didn't, an overpay. I'm not sure there was any player after the wide receiver run that would have been worth, to me, an overpay to move up. Like, how much is it going to cost you to move up those 10 spots? And we'll never know the answer to that. I think you could have justified going to take your pick of the litter at wide receiver a little more than you could have on the line. I don't know a lot about the receivers pretty much after that group, quite honestly. I mean, we've seen some of them, so we'll take a look at it. But I thought when all of that happened, I didn't know what to think. Like, Paul, we watch it and it's like, man, they had so many opportunities to go do something, and the draft actually fell in a way that they had a good look to be able to go do it. And they're sitting here at 31, and I think everyone's kind of like, okay, they're going to trade out here. Somebody's going to come get Will Levis, and that doesn't even happen. And we see that tick timer go down there, the clock timer, and then they make the pick of Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Again, I'm good with that pick. I'm fine with that pick for nostalgic reasons, and in reality, I think it's the appropriate risk for a team that could afford to be a little risky there. But I really would have liked to seen him move up. I thought that the players fell in a way that they could have done it, Paul. I didn't have a good... honestly, like, going to get the corner, to me, would have been the best move, going to get Christian Gonzalez, or even, I guess Forbes. I like Gonzalez more. And then even a receiver. I thought that those were two good opportunities, and they probably could have used one of their extra picks, or even if they had to give up a third or something to do it, I thought they should have. But they didn't. But that would have been my preference. I would have actually, as the draft fell, Paul, I would have liked to seen him move up into that spot to get Gonzalez or Forbes, one of the two defensive backs.
Well, and of course, I was a little flummoxed because I was of the camp, and we'd talked about it in the last couple of days, Zay Flowers was going to be somebody that the Chiefs were going to trade up to try to get because of the things he brings. I mean, that Tyree Hill type, quality of speed and versatility, and lining him up wherever you want, anywhere on the football field and that kind of thing. And I'd really kind of sold myself that this was what they were going to do, whatever it took. They were going to trade up to a point where they thought they could get Zay Flowers. Didn't happen, and it turns out he goes to who did he go? He went
Baltimore.
to the Baltimore Ravens, and I was a little surprised on that. I thought that was where it was going to go. And as you have mentioned, and you can go through Maisie Smith and Anton Harrison and Murphy, and a lot of these guys, they just weren't available. You're going to trade up. Does it make sense for the Chiefs to trade up 2 or 3 spots when you're picking?
I see that. I think so, because I don't think the price tag would have been tremendous.
It may not have been, but that's what it depends on, the price tag. What would it? What would have?
Sure.
What would have taken? None of those players, if the price tag was too high, and I'm not sure what I would define as too high at this point because we just don't know. But I get it. I get why they didn't trade. But I'm still surprised it's Zay Flowers. I mean, everything that
because we know they liked him, right? Because we know he'd been talking to Patrick Mahomes.
We knew that
they'd worked out and done all that. Yeah, I agree.
I know.
I agree.
And I thought,
especially when you saw Quentin Johnston go. I mean, that's the spot there where it's like, oh my God, we got to go get Zay Flowers. Like, I think that you could envision scenarios always where wide receivers go a little earlier, right? And they just weren't. And you're into the 20s now, and you can essentially get your guy. It felt like, okay, go do it. Go get him. I think that seeing Gonzalez fall as far as he did was an absolute surprise. And that's why, like, as it's happening, I'm like, go get this guy. Just, now is where you go and get a potential game changer. They didn't do it. And then it's like, okay, well, the receivers haven't gone yet. Now it's like you're not even moving up that high to get receivers. We'd wondered if they'd have to get into the teens to take one of these guys. Well, now you're to 20. Man. Okay. And the other thing is, too, that makes this hard to look at, right, is how do they evaluate, what does their board look like? So 4 receivers are off the board. Paul, they may love Marvin Mims, for instance, just to use the name of a guy we all have seen play, right? Maybe they love Marvin Mims. That's what makes it hard, too. They may have evaluated a large group of receivers that they felt about the same about, so they didn't want to go get somebody. And that's what I've always, I've been saying this for months now, since the end of the season. That's what makes it hard for me, because my preference for the Chiefs is for them to just trust their evaluation and trust their board, right? If they didn't think that any of those receivers were worth moving up for, and the difference between those receivers wasn't massive between the receivers that are still there, then yeah, you don't move up, right? If they feel the same way about offensive line, which I sort of do, by the way, then yeah, you don't move up. I thought the corner was interesting because nobody saw that coming. But again, it just didn't work out. So The other thing is, Paul, maybe they do feel that highly about Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Now, they maybe think they could have got him a little bit later, but at some point you can't risk it, because if he's there now, he's not going to be there at the end of the second round. You can't draft that way. You can't imagine that he would be. So, got to just trust their board, trust their evaluation process. I'll tell you this, Paul, that evaluation process over the last 2 years has been really, really, really good. So if it's right again and they got a guy that they really like, so be it. We'll talk about some of the other things now in the draft. Lamar Jackson, how about that news? We'll get into all of it as we make our way through Sports Daily. We haven't even talked about the top of the draft yet, which was nuts with the Texans. So much more to get through as we make our way to round 2 and 3 now, which are not as important as round 1, but they're really, really close. More Sports Daily coming for you right after this.